Biggles was whistling softly as he walked into the breakfast room of his flat in Mount Street, but broke off as he reached for a bulky package with Canadian stamps lying beside his plate. Across the top was printed in block letters, "Confidential. If away, please forward." "What's Wilks doing in Canada, I wonder?" murmured Algy from the other side of the table. Biggles glanced up. "Been doing a bit of Sherlock Holmes stuff with my correspondence, eh?" "Well, as I happen to know Wilkes' fist, and am able to recognise a Canadian stamp when I see one, I put two and two together," replied Algy casually. "Who's Wilkes?" Ginger asked Algy. He had finished his breakfast and was sitting by the fire. "Wilkes, or rather Captain Wilkinson, was a flight commander in 187 Squadron in France," answered Algy. "He was an officer in the Bolivian Air Force when we last saw him. I wonder what sent him up north." Biggles read the letter to the end before laying it on the table beside him. "Poor old Wilkes is in a jam," he said quietly. "What's the trouble?" asked Algy. Biggles picked up the letter again. "Listen to this. The letter's headed Arctic Airways, Fort Beaver, Canada. My dear Biggles, as you probably remember, letter writing is not in my line, so you no doubt guessed before you opened this that things must be pretty sticky. Believe me, they're all that, and more. Before I start my story, I may as well say that the odds seem to be against my being alive by the time you get this. If I just disappear, or get wiped out in what looks like a genuine crash, find a fellow named McBain, Brindle Jake he is called around these parts, and hand him a bunch of slugs from me, as a last service from an old pal." "By gosh, things must be pretty grim for old Wilkes to write in that strain," broke in Algy. "Grim is the right word for it," said Biggles shortly. "But don't interrupt, just listen to this. You remember that I was in Bolivia a few years ago. Well, there was a change of government, and as I didn't like the new one, or maybe the new one didn't like me, I packed my valise, headed north, and ultimately drifted into Canada. One day I struck lucky and got a charter job flying a mining engineer up to some new goldfields for an outfit called the Moose Creek Goldfields Corporation. You may have heard of the last place on Earth. Well, I can tell you where it is. Moose Creek. It's well inside the Arctic Circle, though why they call it Moose Creek I don't know, for no moose in its right mind would go within 100 miles of the perishing place. But that's by the way. Having got the lowdown about these goldfields, I had one of my rare inspirations. "Oh, that's old Wilkes for you," said Algy. "Moose Creek is 800 miles north of the nearest railhead, and the journey, made by canoe in summer and dog sled during the freeze-up, takes about 6 weeks, heavy going. It struck me that since there was certain to be a fair amount of traffic to and from the goldfields, an airline might be worked up into a paying proposition. In an aircraft, the journey could be done in a day instead of 6 weeks. To cut a long story short, I put all my savings into the venture, opening up my own landing field at Fort Beaver, which is the railhead. I called it Arctic Airways. I got into the money, and with my profits bought a second machine. Then, listen to this, out of the blue, another fellow jumped my claim. The same Brindle Jake that I've already mentioned. It seemed a bit thick after all I'd been through, but I figured that there ought to be enough money in the game for the two of us. However, Brindle had his own ideas about that. He decided that 2 in the game was one too many, and he wasn't going to be the one to go. From that moment I learned that the gloves were off. There is only one possible landing ground within 50 miles of Fort Beaver, and that's mine. I bought the land off a fellow named Angus Sterling, who had decided that he preferred prospecting for gold to farming. I paid him cash, whereupon he headed north with his gear, and hasn't been seen since. I cleared the ground, put up a shed, and the land became Fort Beaver Landing Field. There was never any question about the title of the land until, one day, 2 Winkel 12 transport planes landed, and out stepped Brindle Jake and his 2 pilots, Joe Sarton, a tall chap, good-looking in a rugged sort of way, and Tex Ferroni, a slim, dark little fellow. McBain himself is a big, broad-shouldered bloke with odd patches of grey in his hair and beard. That's how he gets his nickname, I'm told. A French-Canadian named Jean Chicot trails after him like a dog, and I reckon he's McBain's bodyguard. Pretty motley crew, put in Algy. Biggles read on. You can guess my surprise when McBain calmly told me to clear off the land. I can't go into details now, but for the first time I learned that there was some doubt as to the title of the land I'd bought off
Sample complete. Ready to continue?